Alright, hello and welcome, fellow users of the internet. My name is Noah and you're watching Asphodel Merchants. Alright, this Friday is going to be the pre-release for the Lost Cavern of Ixalan. And you know what that means. New set, that means new tier list. We're going to start off with black because it's my favorite color. Don't judge me for being too edgy. We're going to rank all the cards in the limited environment from A plus to F. A plus are our bombs and super efficient removal spells, card advantage engines. They're the best cards in the formats, the number ones you want to open. They'll always help you win and they'll always help you not lose. Your deck will probably be worse if you don't make room for them, so that's A plus. We got A. A is normally our pretty strong aggressive cards, our top pick removal spells, and other high synergy picks. Bs are bread and butters. You want to have as many Bs in your deck as possible, and you can feasibly get a lot. They're your more efficient cards, your reasonable removal spells, so on and so forth. Cs are pretty much your dirt. The vast majority of your cards, unfortunately, will end up being Cs. You shouldn't feel too bad about them being in your deck, but you want to try to prioritize things more heavily. Ds are begrudgingly playables a lot of the times, are like 20 through 24th picks. You don't want to play them, but sometimes you just need another playable. Maybe it's a bit of a bad card, but it helps fill out the curve. You'll want to avoid putting in your deck most of the time anyway. And Fs are our trap cards, are cards that'll almost always make your deck worse. You should never take them, and you should avoid playing them at all costs. Alright, first up we have Abyssal Gorestalker. Am I going to control any more time? Okay, yeah, that's great, 300%. Abyssal Gorestalker, 4 colorless, black. For a creature, it's a horror, and it's a 6/6. When Abyssal Gorestalker enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices 2 creatures. I'm not much of a fan of this card in Limited. 6 drops really need to be doing more than this. 6 mana for a 6/6 is okay, but the fact that you only want this card if your opponent is only playing good creatures and you've only got bad ones, or you've at least got 2 bad ones, and I don't think that's going to be that easy in this format. If they also have a removal spell, well, this is on the stack to get rid of something else, it can kind of blow you out and make you sacrifice your whole board. I don't like Abyssal Gorestalker really very much at all. I think it's a D. However, next up we have probably one of the best cards to open in black, and it's Aclazotz, the Deepest Betrayal. 3 colorless, black for a 4/4. It's a legendary creature, Bat God. It has flying and lifelink. When Aclazotz attacks, each opponent discards a card. For each opponent who can't, you draw a card. Whenever an opponent discards a land card, create a 1/1 black bat creature token with flying. When Aclazotz dies, return it to the battlefield, transform under control, and that is the Temple of the Dead we've got on the back here. It's a land, it has tap, add 1 black, and pay 2 colors and a black, tap. Transform Temple of the Dead, activate only if a player has 1 or fewer cards in hand, as only as a sorcery. Not going to take too much time talking about this one. It's black, it's a mythic, it's really good, it's hard to kill, it kills your opponent, it's an A+. Won't get into other reasons, not all, and this is also just one of the better gods, I think, in the cycle. Its attack trigger is very relevant. 5 mana for a 4/4 flying lifelink. It's really good stats, helps you get card advantage, helps you get other threats, and if they just kill it the regular way, it should be relatively easy to transform back as a creature, just because you getting yourself hellbent shouldn't be that hard, even if you can't do it to your opponent. So that is Aclazotz Deepest Betrayal, first A+, great card. I hope to open one myself. Next up we have Acolyte of Aclazotz, 2 colorless and a black for a creature, Vampire Cleric. It's a 1/4 and it has tap. Sacrificing another creature or artifact, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Pretty good card. I am going to put this in C. You're not going to be unhappy with this card, but you definitely don't want too many copies. It is great that it works at instant speed, so you can set up blocks and then get rid of things, or whenever they try to remove things, you can keep this up to not get a little bit of extra value off of something they were already forced into killing. So C for Acolyte of Aclazotz. Next up we have Another Chance. 2 colorless and a black for an instant. You may mill 2 cards, then return up to 2 creature cards from your graveyard to your hand. This card I'm going to put in B. The first copy you play will always be B, probably trending towards B+. However, your next copy of this card will probably almost be trending towards C-, even D. Your first copy is always going to be really good. It helps trigger Descent. It's going to help you just keep in the game and replay your best creatures. B for another chance. Next up we have Bitter Triumph. Colorless and a black for an instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card or pay 3 life, destroy target creature or planeswalker. This is your uncommon black removal spell. I'm going to put it in A. It's super good. It's always going to kill the most important threat on your opponent's side of the battlefield, except for a few indestructible ones that I think might exist. But that's still not here nor there. Also takes out a planeswalker for whatever that's worth. You can help you discard a land to trigger your Descent cards more often and get your Fathomless Descent or your total Descent count up. So yeah, A for Bitter Triumph. Next up we have Bloodletter of Ixalan. 1 colorless, black, black, black for a creature, vampire, demon. It's a 2/4. It has flying. And it says, if an opponent would lose life during your turn, they lose twice that much life instead. This card is probably not good pretty much at all. Triple black is going to be really hard on your mana base a lot of the time. I think this card is its best in an aggressive deck on turn 4 exactly. And anytime you cast it after turn 4, it's going to be a little rough. It is a vampire, which is a relevant creature type for some of the other stuff we're going to see. It is effectively a 4-mana 4/4 flyer, but it's hard to cast. I'm going to start this off in C. I could believe that it performs a little bit better than that, but I also can see it performing worse. You might just take it early anywhere, be happy to open it so it can go in your mono black devotion decks in Pioneer, get some good old Gary action, some Grey Merchant of Asphodel going on. Yeah, probably a #1 craft in Arena, but probably just a C in the limited environment. Alright, next up we have Bloodthorn Flail, 1 black for an artifact equipment. Equip creature gets +2/+1, and equip is pay 3 colorless, or discard a card. Now, discarding a card is normally pretty bad, but we've got a few caveats in this format. Discarding a permanent card will allow you to trigger Descent, or Descendant, however you say it, yeah. It'll help you trigger Descend, right? It'll help get your total Descent count up to 4 or 8, those little good permanent thresholds. And it also, +2/+1 for no actual mana is just a beats. So you can just discard a land or a card that has an activating ability from the graveyard, which will then help you with the craft stuff. Just put something in your graveyard and then be able to craft it later with something else you're about to play. I am going to put Bloodthorn Flail in B for right now. I think this card is going to be really good in the black aggressive decks. Now, how many of the black aggressive strategies are going to be good is here to be seen. I should really put this in C. Now, I'm sticking with it. Every once in a while, you're going to play a good 1-drop. There are 2 really good 1-drops in white. You're going to play one of those cards, play this on turn 2, attack for 3 flying on turn 2, and just beat the crap out of your opponent. I'm giving Bleed a Bloodthorn Flail. This card just seems powerful. All right, next up, we have kind of the opposite end of the spectrum in Bringer of the Last Gift. 6 colorless and 2 black for a creature, vampire, demon. 8 mana total for a 6/6. It has flying. Whenever Bringer of the Last Gift enters the battlefield, if you cast it, each player sacrifices all other creatures they control. Then each player returns all creature cards from their graveyard that weren't put there this way to the battlefield. So it's an 8 mana 6/6 with a living death attached to it. I hate this card so much. It is an F. It's 8 mana, so you are almost never going to be able to cast this card ever. And even when you do, there's a small chance that your opponent's graveyard might even be better than yours. So for this card to be good, you would want your opponent to sacrifice a lot of creatures, not bring any back, and you have not any creatures and bring more than a few back. It's just so many hoops to jump through, and you don't actually even win the game. They just remove this. It doesn't, yeah, because it doesn't have any protection for itself. They just remove this card, and then you're back to grinding out through cards you've already grinded through. This card's terrible. Commander players rejoice. I'm sure it's going to be good there, whatever. I'm sure there's going to be... It's definitely going to put it to the groan test whenever my opponents, who can barely read it, resolve it. And then we go from there, and I still win, but yeah, whatever. F for Bringer of the Last Gift. You're not allowed to play this card if you're actually good. Brood Rage Mycoid is next up. Mycoid. 3 colorless and a black for a creature. It's a fungus at common. It's a 4/3. And at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, create a 1/1 black creature fungus token with this creature can't block. It's a C. 4 mana, 4/3 is good stats. Fungus, making a fungus relevant creature type. Blood Rage Mycoid is C. Alright, next up we have Canonized in Blood. 1 colorless and a black for an enchantment. It says at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. And it has 5 colorless, black, sacrifice Canonized in Blood, create a 4/3 white and black vampire demon creature token with flying. This card's also an F. It does not affect the board whenever it comes onto the field. You have to jump through a lot of hoops just to get a +1/+1 counter on a creature, if you even have one. And then finally, you get to pay like 7 mana just to get a 4/3 and to get a descend trigger. This card's really bad. Don't put it in your deck. Alright, next up we have Chupacabra Echo, or Chupacabra Echo. 2 colorless, black for a creature, beast, horror, spirit. It is a 3/2 and it has Fathomless Descent. When Chupacabra Echo enters the battlefield, target creature and opponent controls gets -X until end of turn, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. And just in case you're wondering, anytime something says Fathomless Descent, it just means you're going to do something based on the total number of permanents in your graveyard. This card is pretty good. Am I going to put it in A? Because it is a 2-for-1. It's an A if you're actually killing something. If you aren't actually killing something, well, you probably aren't casting it. It's just 4 mana, 3/2, and that's like a D. But assuming you know a thing or two about deck building, you're gonna have some permanents in your graveyard. And even if you did just like kill a 2/2 with this on turn 4, that's gonna be pretty good. And it probably won't be that hard with the caves and some of the other stuff to have 3 or 4 permanents in your graveyard like you're wanting, and this will always kill something relevant. So right now, I'm going to give Chupacabra Echo an A. I think it is going to play out pretty good as long as you don't mess around and not as long as you do not mess around and you do make sure to have some permanent cards in your graveyard, which you should already. All right, next up we have Corpses of the Lost. Yeah, corpses, plural. 2 colorless and a black for an enchantment. Skeletons you control get +1/+0 and have haste. When Corpses of the Lost enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 black skeleton pirate creature token. At the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, you may pay 1 life. If you do, return Corpse of the Lost to its owner's hand. Okay. So first of all, be warned that a token dying does not trigger descend. Tokens aren't cards, doesn't work. So you're going to have something else into the graveyard for this card to keep going, but at the end of the day, this is still 3 mana for a 3/2 haste, which is pretty good, and the fact that you could ever at any time just get to pay 1, well, not any time, at any possible end step where you descend, you get to pay 1 life, and then get to play the skin next turn and get another one, is pretty good. I think I am going to go ahead and put this in A. I could see it only operating at about a B level, but I think you're going to be happy enough to play this most of the time. And don't forget that Pirate is a relevant creature type, so whenever you're in some combination of the Grixis colors, this is always going to give you another tribal payoff. So A for Corpses of the Lost. Corpses. I hate saying that. Dead Weight is 1 black, incontinent, it's an aura. Enchanted creature gets -2/-2. Great card. I think this is going to operate at about a B level. It's always going to kill something, help kill something after combat. Kill their 2/2 so you can just get into attack. You know, just very efficient, not coming in for a whole lot at just 1 black mana, not much of a cost to put in your deck. And it triggers Descent whenever you get to put this in your graveyard whenever the creature dies. So B for Deadweight. Next up we have Deep Goblin Skull Taker, 2 colorless and a black for a creature. It's a Goblin Warrior, it's 2/2 and it has Menace. And at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Deep Goblin Skull Taker. This card, I think, unfortunately, is about a D. It's at the top end of D. It's a pretty efficient. It's an efficient enough card, but I don't think it's going to operate all that well because just making your 3/3 bigger. The best scenario on this is going to be you go to combat on turn 2, you trade 2 drops with your opponent, play this, and you have a 3/3 menace. That's pretty good, but 3/3 is not all that invulnerable. It dies to a Braid, which we're going to see later in red. It dies to a lot of the removal that is in this format, even at 3 toughness. So I'm only giving a D to Deep Goblin Skull Taker. It also doesn't help that it's a Goblin Warrior. Goblins and Warriors are not very relevant creature types. Sorry about that, folks. I am one of the few Americans you may still run into that actually has a landline. Next up, we have Deep Cavern Bat. 1 colorless and a black for a creature. It's a bat. It's a 1/1, but it has flying and lifelink, and when Deep Cavern Bat enters the battlefield, look at target opponent's hand. You may exile a non-land card from it until Deep Cavern Bat leaves the battlefield. That is a somewhat relevant creature type, and just gaining life triggers a decent amount of stuff in this format. So I'm actually going to give a D to Deep Cavern Bat. I think it is pretty good, and you're normally going to be pretty happy every time you cast this card, forcing them to use a removal spell on a 2-mana 1/1 to get their card or threat back take, or just taking their best removal spell and making them find something else. B for Deep Cavern Bat. Alright, next up we have Defossilize. 4 colorless and a black for a sorcery. It's an uncommon. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That creature explores, then it explores again. And I'll read explore this one time, maybe again if I forget. Reveal the top card of your library. Put that card into your hand if it's a land. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature. Then put the card back or put it into your graveyard, then repeat this process. So, where do I want to put this? I should probably put it in D, just because that's how these reanimation spells have kind of been acting all these big 5-mana silly ones. You normally always just have another removal spell or just pick another threat. But in Sealed, which is what pre-release is, we're coming up, if you do have an A to A+ level creature where it'll be really good when it comes back to the battlefield, I think it's actually going to operate about on a C level. So, yeah, I'm going to give C to Defossilize, especially since I'm excited to see, for some reason, we have a creature and then that creature explores twice. Don't know why, but that just feels like it's going to be pretty much better, especially since there are other creatures that do extra things when you explore. So if you can have some of those in your deck, it's probably going to operate closer to a B level, and especially if you have some of our A+ or A's that we're going to see some more of, that'll also make this card work better, but for right now, just a C for Defossilize. Alright, next up we have Echo of Dusk, 1 colorless and a black. For a creature vampire spirit, it's a 2/2, and it has Descend 4. As long as there are 4 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, Echo of Dusk gets +1/+1 and has lifelink. I think this card is really good. I think I actually should put this in B, because I don't know. Like, it's always just a 2-mana 2/2. No. Okay. Talking myself down. It is a very good C. If you can somehow get Descend 4 on like turn 3 or 4, this card's going to be pretty ludicrous. But that's probably going to be a little bit more difficult than I'm imagining. If you can do that, somehow have Descend 4 on turn 3 and attack for 3, lifelink on turn 3, then this card is going to be like an A-. But most of the time, probably aren't going to see Descent 4 happening until a little bit later in the game. So right now, I'm going to stick with C for Echo of Dusk, but it is a C+, and probably the top of C+. Alright, next up we have Fanatical Offering. 1 colorless and a black for an instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact or a creature. Draw 2 cards and create a map token. These cards have been doing a lot better in Limited these days. We saw Nasty End do great work in Lord of the Rings. Deadly Dispute was amazing in its format. I think the 1 black, there's been a couple printings now of, I think it's called Village Rites. 1 black, sacrifice a creature, draw 2, and that normally helps you like leave just a little something up, and then if they have a removal spell for your creature, you get rid of it. But this also sacrifices artifacts, which is really important. So you get your value out of some of the ETB artifacts that you're not really planning on crafting, and just turn those into 2 cards. You can also turn the map tokens that other creatures leave behind into 2 cards and a map token. Oh, and in case I go ahead and read map token right fast. A map token is an artifact with pay 1 colorless and tap it, sacrifice this artifact, target creature you control explores, activate only as a sorcery. We're going to see plenty of other cards that make map tokens, and you're going to be able to turn them into cards with this card. Good B for Fanatical Offering. Alright, next up we have Fungal Fortitude with a colorless and a black for an enchantment. It's an aura. It has flash. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature gets +2/+0, and when enchanted creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. This is a good enough C. Put it somewhere about right here. Giving +2/+0 will help the creature. So normally what's going to happen is you're either going to attack or block, and then once blocks are declared, you play Fungal Fortitude. Now your creature gets to trade up, and you get your creature back. So it's still kind of a 1-for-1. If you ever return anything with an ETB or a death trigger, you're going to feel pretty smart. +2/+0 should help most things trade. So I'm going to give a C for Fungal Fortitude. Alright, next up we have Gargantuan Leech. 7 mana. No, wait, 7 colorless and 1 black, 8 whole mana for a 5/5 lifelink. But don't feel too bad, because this creature leech also says this spell costs 1 less to cast for each cave you control and each cave card in your graveyard. So when I first read this card, I'm like, man, that's probably not going to be good enough. But then I found out that 7 out of every 10 packs will have a cave card in it instead of a basic land. So there should be at a draft pod of at a draft pod of 8 people, that's 3 booster packs, 24. There should be something like 14 to 15 caves. So in draft, this card will probably be okay. If you're casting it for 5, so yeah, you only need 3 caves total. If you ever cast for 5 mana, you're doing pretty good. In sealed, however, you're only going to open 6 packs, and if you only open 1 or worse, no caves, this card could be pretty bad. Oh man, I should maybe put this in D. 5 lifelink is like a really powerful thing, but man, like if you like even paying 6 mana, ugh. I'm just feeling like there are going to be some bad times, like where you're going to be looking at this card in your hand and only have 1 cave on the battlefield. I'm not feeling it. I'm going to give a D to Gargantuan Leech, but I do say that I hope I'm proven wrong, and people blow me up in the comments here soon saying, man, can't believe you did this. I cast Gargantuan Leech for like 3 mana, and it was the coolest thing ever. So Good luck out there with Gargantuan Leech, but I don't think I'm going to be that excited to put this card in my deck. However, we now have Grasping Shadows, 3 colorless and a black for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks alone, it gains Death Touch and Lifelink until it turns. So it turns everything into kind of a mini Vampire Nighthawk. However, it also says put a Dread counter on Grasping Shadows after you resolve that first ability. Then if there are 3 or more Dread counters on it, transform it into Shadow's Lair. It's a land and it's a cave. Tap, add 1 black, and pay 1 black to tap it and remove a Dread counter from Shadow's Lair. You draw a card and lose 1 life. It's black and it says draw a card on it. It's good. You have to play it. Them's the rules. Now, okay, now here's something I've got to ask. You know, like, Judge, hey, are these cards that say cave on the back, do those count off Gargantuan Leech? Because if that's true, you might be able to get Gargantuan Leech in C- range. Sorry about going back to cards, but I literally didn't think about that until I just read this card. If it doesn't, that's still pretty bad. So it's probably only the cave cards you actually open. Whatever. B for Grasping Shadow, though. Alright, next up we've got Greedy Freebooter, 1 black for a creature. It's a human pirate. When Greedy Freebooter dies, scry 1 and create a treasure token. It's a 1/1. I think I already said that. This card's pretty good. Am I going to put this in B? I think it's better than a C. I think you're going to be like happy to have this card. You're just always going to attack with it because what are they going to do? Block and let you fix your draw, ramp, and give a descent trigger? You're always going to want this. Oh, man, yeah, I think this Greedy Freebooters are B. And Pirate, again, is a relevant creature token. It's going to get buffed from the Pirates Matters cards. B for Greedy Freebooter. Alright, next up we have Join the Dead. You have a colorless and black for an instant. Target creature gets -5/-5 until end turn. Descend 4. That creature gets -10, -10 until end of turn if there are 4 more permanent cards in your graveyard. This card is also an A. It's really good. You will have to be relatively heavier in black. You're not really going to be able to play this off the splash. But as long as you're in black or playing like at least 8 mountains, you're going to cast this relatively easily. And even if you cast it a little later, even on like turn 5 and 6, -5 is still going to kill pretty much anything you run into, minus a few of the best threats in the format. So yeah, Join the Dead's an A. Take it, put it in your deck. Alright, next up we have Malicious Eclipse. 1 colorless and black for a sorcery. All creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn. If a creature an opponent controls would die this turn, exile instead. Otlazot's laughed as the dark shard closed around Chimel, plunging the core into unnatural darkness. At long last, his bloody reign would begin. Okay, so Malicious Eclipse is probably a D in most decks. Killing your own 2-drops is going to be rough. You're not really going to be able to play this after combat or play it to get into combat. It's cool that it exiles your opponent's stuff and not yours. We've not seen that explicitly. I think that, you know, breaking that symmetry, I could maybe see some decks playing this card, but most of those decks are going to, for some reason, not have any 2-toughness creatures in them, which is going to be a little rough. So right now we're going to give a D to Malicious Eclipse. Alright, next up we have Mephitic Draught. 1 colorless and a black for an artifact. When Mephitic Draught enters the battlefield or is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. By the way, this is Mephitic Draft, in case you didn't know. DRAGHT is like draft beer or whatever. My bad. But yeah, this card is just a C, I think, probably in the tail end of C. Funny thing is, when you can't craft this and get a second card because crafting exiles the material. I don't really know how many ways you're destroying your own artifacts in this format, but I think there's more than one. If I read one, hopefully I'll mention this card again. But still, colorless and a black to draw a card is not too bad. You also, even though you don't get the second card, you might have some powerful craft card that I'm not sure is right now, but need an extra artifact in your deck to hopefully get that card going. So right now I'm going to put C on Mephetic Drop, but it could probably end up just playing as D+. Alright, next up we have Preacher of the Schism, 2 colorless and a black for a creature vampire cleric. It is a 2/4. It has Death Touch. It also says, whenever Preacher of the Schism attacks the player with the most life or tied for the most life, create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. And whenever Preacher of the Schism attacks while you have the most life or tied for the most life, you draw a card and lose 1 life. So what's really cool is if you and your opponent are both tied, you'll get both effects. So if you're both at 20 and this is the first attack of the game, you get a 1/1 vampire with lifelink and draw a card and lose a life. This card is an A+. It is amazing. I think it's one of the best cards in black, maybe one of the best cards in this whole format. It's cheap. It's always a great threat, and having Death Touch also makes it a great blocker, so it helps us on that not losing part. I love me some Preacher of the Schism. Can't wait to play with it. Good luck finding one out there. Alright, next up we have Primordial Gnar. We got 4 colorless and a black for a creature. It's an insect horror. It's a 5/2, and it says when Primordial Gnar dies, discover 3. Rediscover for the first time. Exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with mana value 3 or less. Cast it without paying its mana cost or put it into your hand. Put the rest on the bottom in a random order. So, Discover is basically fixed Cascade. You actually have to resolve the spell to get the trigger or whatnot, or in this case, resolve the spell and it die. And then if you find something you don't want to cast right now, like a destroy a target attacking or blocking creature card or a counter spell, you can just put it in your hand. Now, we haven't seen this effect yet play. As of right now, I'm going to tentatively put Primordial Gnar just in D. Insect Horror is not a relevant creature type in this format. There's also a decent, well, maybe not a decent amount, but there is a non-zero amount of exiling removal. We just saw the card right next to it, Malicious Eclipse. So, you resolve this 5/2, your opponent's like, oh great, good thing I put this Malicious Eclipse in my deck. That way I kill your 5-drop, and it gets exiled. You don't get Discover 3. You also don't get this Discover if they use a tap effect to remove it, or an enchantment. There's a white common Arrest in this format, which also doesn't stop it. So I'm leaving on D for Primordial Gnar, also since, just 5-drops aren't that good anymore. But Discover should be a pretty good mechanic, and we'll see better versions of it later. Alright, next up we got Queen... Oh my gosh, we got so many more cards. Why am I taking so long? Alright, next up we got Queen's Bay Paladin. 3 colorless and black for a creature. It's a Vampire Knight, and it's a 5/4. When Queen's Bay Paladin enters the battlefield or attacks, return up to 1 target vampire card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. You lose life equal to its mana cost. If a creature with a finality counter on it would die, exile it instead. Love making these counters that do things that aren't just putting more words on the cards. I do think we're going to put this in regular A. Man, should I put this in A+? It is really good. It's always a 2-for-1, but it's only always a 2-for-1 if you've got, black. This might be important. Oh my gosh.
Call from ST.
Help. He's not here. I'm his son. Alright. Maybe I'll edit that out, maybe I won't. Who knows? Yeah, life happens sometimes and I'm not starting this half an hour video over. They put it in A. That's good enough. It could maybe be an A+. You'll probably always put it in your deck as long as you're black and you've probably got a non-zero number of vampires. Alright, next up we've got Rampaging Spiketail. It's 4 colorless and black for a creature dinosaur. It's a 5/6. When it enters the battlefield, target creature you control gets +2/+0 and gains indestructible until end of turn. It has Swamp Cycling 2. Pay 2. Discard this card, search your library for a swamp card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. You got, you know what I say, always be thagomizing. I don't really say it that much, but I'm going to give it a C. You probably, these are worse than the last round of Swamp Cyclers, than the Land Cyclers we saw, probably all of them across the board. But they do help trigger Descent. The fact that even though you don't really want a 6-drop, you also don't really want, pay 2 colorless, go find a swamp. The fact that this is both, and we have the Descend mechanic, so this will help your Descend cards go off whenever you want them to, makes this card probably good enough to be a C. C for Rampaging Spiketail or, Thagomizing Supreme. Alright, next up we have Ray of Ruin. 4 colorless and a black for a sorcery. Exile target creature, vehicle, or non-basic land. Scry 1. I am putting Ray of Ruin in B. I've heard people say this is the bad removal spell of the set, and I don't think this is going to be farther from the truth. Yeah, it's a sorcery, but it's exile target creature, which I think you are really going to want because there's so much graveyard synergy to this. This kills all of the stupid gods at Mythic. Yeah, I'm moving it all the way up. It kills all the stupid gods at Mythic. Some of the vehicles in this format are also super powerful. I don't think you're going to want to be exiling any non-basic lands, but who knows? This card's super flexible. It's efficient enough. It's very powerful. I'm giving B to Ray of Ruin. Fight me. All right, next up, we've got Screaming Phantom. 2 colorless and a black for a creature spirit. It's a 2/2 with flying. We've got ourselves a Windrake. But this Windrake says whenever a Screaming Phantom attacks melee card. It's whenever Screaming Phantom, not a Phantom, whatever. But yeah, this card is pretty bad. I might actually put this in the top end of D, because Spirit is not a relevant creature type. It says mill a card, but you aren't always going to mill a permanent, so that it doesn't actually help Descent all that well. Yeah, I'm going to leave this on D. It dies to all the removal, it's not that good of a threat, and it just misses enough. D for Screaming Phantom. Alright, next up we have Skull Clamp Snail. 1 colorless and a black for a creature. It's a fungus snail. When Skull Cap Snail enters the battlefield, target opponent exiles a card from their hand. It's a 1/1, in case I didn't say that. Ugh, aren't regular snails gross enough? Alright. I think I am still just going to put this in C. Ravenous Rats is still kind of just Ravenous Rats, but this card still has a lot of stuff going on. I could almost put it in B, but I don't think it's actually that good. The fact that it exiles the card from their hand entirely is super cool. Fungus is a relevant creature type in the black-green archetype, or even just for, black-green archetype. I don't think any of the just black cards care about it. It's a permanent, so you can block with it and die and trigger your Descend. It counts your total permanent count for Descend. I like Skullclamp Snail a lot. So C for Skullclamp Snail. Maybe a little higher. Alright, next up we've got Soul Coil Viper. 2 colorless and a black for a creature. It's a snake and it's a 2/3. And it has 1 black. Sacrifice Soul Coil Viper. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Activate only as a sorcery. Now, how good do I think this card is? Because, 3 mana 2/3 is not amazing. However, You know, you're in black, we're doing the descend stuff, you're wanting them all a lot. Oh no, I've accidentally milled my best thingy. I'm gonna reanimate it with Soul Coil Viper. Does it have an ETB? I think that's probably the biggest thing. Is like if you can reanimate something, because the best you can do this on turn 4. I'm not sure exactly how you're putting your best card into the graveyard on turn 2. I don't know if there's a for sure way to do it. But let's say you did. Get your best thing in there on turn 2. You got this down on turn 3. You reanimate it on turn 4. If it has a good ETB, this is probably actually trending towards being an A. But without it, it's just a cool nuts and bolts card that is going to live and die by the quality of the best threat in your entire deck and how soon you can put it in your graveyard and if this lives. So, C right now for Soul Coil Viper, but hopefully it'll still be really cool when you get to use it. Alright, next up we have Souls of the Lost. 1 colorless and a black for a creature spirit. It's a star and star +1. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card or sacrifice a permanent. Fathomless Descent. Soul of the Lost power is equal to the number of permanent cards in your graveyard, and its toughness is equal to that number +1. This card is probably a B, I think. I don't think it's quite an A because it's not really good early. Where am I putting this in B? Probably about right here. It is a good card. This is sometimes one of those cards where it's like, okay, I'm in black. Hopefully I'll wheel it. Somebody's not going to always take this card. But when you get to be the Descent deck and this gets to be one of your payoffs, it will be pretty good. But I don't know if I certainly don't think it's a reason to be the deck. So B for Soul of the Lost. Alright, next up we have Stalactite Stalker. 1 black for a creature. It's a goblin rogue. It has menace, and it's a 1/1. It also says, at the beginning of your end step, if you descended this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Stalactite Stalker. And it also says, pay 2 colorless and a black, sacrifice Stalactite Stalker, target creature gets -X/-X until end of turn, where X is Stalactite Stalker's power. This is at least a B. This is an A. It is only a 1 mana creature. We're going to put it towards the top of B. It is the B. If you, on the games where you actually get to cast this on like turn 1 and somehow trigger Descend on turn 2 and 3, you always have this menacing 3/3 that then at some point in the game they finally find the answer for it, but you get to hold up 3 mana and kill something of theirs at the same time. Then it'll be an A to an A+. But that's a little bit Magical Christmas Land, but only a little. And so right now we're going to put it on B for just being a 1/1 black menace. That'll probably be a 2/2 or a 3/3. A decent amount of time. Alright, next up we have Sheoldred at Home. Sorry to throw you that shade, Starving Revenant. That's what the card is. It's 2 colorless and black for a 4/4. It's a creature, spirit horror. When Starving Revenant enters the battlefield, surveil 2. Then for each card you put on top of your library, you draw a card and lose 3 life. That's a yikes. However, we've got Descend 8. Whenever you draw a card, if there are 8 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So all in all, this card is pretty powerful. I do think I'm going to give it an A. Because if you're behind, you can just choose to bottom both cards and not lose any life. And you should hopefully get Descend 8 eventually with not too much work. And so all that together is going to help Starving Revenant probably be a good enough. Well, not just good enough. It is an A. It is a reason to be in black enough. It shouldn't take you very much deck building tools at all to make this, like I said, a discount Sheoldred. Very discounted. So yeah, A for Starving Revenant. Alright, next up we have Stinging Cave Crawler. 2 colorless and a black for a creature. It's an insect horror. It's a 1/3 and it has Death Touch. It also has Descend 4. Whenever Stinging Cave Crawler attacks, if there are 4 or more permanent cards in your graveyard, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Caverns uninhibited by mycoids are often infested with worse. Do like me some bugs and some insects. Hello. Alright, awesome. Somebody called me and just didn't answer. And didn't say anything whenever I answered, that is. Alright, but it's definitely not a B. Sorry about that. I don't want to put this in A. It's just like always going to be good, right? It's black and it says draw a card on it. It always blocks well. It should attack well enough, because like on turn 4 when this is attacking, it shouldn't be all that hard to play something else and maybe sacrifice something of your own. Maybe we'll see. As of right now, I'm putting it in A just because I think this is a pretty good threat. Like, okay, yeah, they'll just take it. They don't want to lose their creature. But then you're now drawing cards and getting ahead in card advantage. So, tentatively in A, all depending on how hard it is to send 4 in this format and in your deck. Alright, next up we have Synapse Necromage, 2 colorless and a black for a creature. It's a fungus wizard. When Synapse Necromage dies, create 2 1/1 black fungus creature tokens with this creature can't block. It's a 3/1, by the way. Oh wait, no, not D, C. It is a pretty good C at that. Fungus, like I said, is a relevant creature type, but 3 mana 3/1's a little vulnerable, and can't block is some pretty important text there. So it's a C, but it's nothing all that amazing. Next up we have Tarian's Journal, 1 colorless and a black for a legendary artifact. Tap, sacrifice another artifact or creature. Draw a card. Activate only as a sorcery. Pay 2, discard your hand. Transform Tarian's Journal into the Tomb of Ixalan. It's a legendary land cave. It has tap, add 1 black. Tap, you may cast a creature spell from your graveyard this turn. If you do, it enters the battlefield with a finality counter on it and is a vampire in addition to its other types. This card's amazing. I think this is an A+. You know, being able to sacrifice your tokens and whatever poopy effect artifacts you have is going to be really good. And then once you finally run out of cards and then get to just pay 2 mana and transform this, and then on the next turn recast the best creature card in your graveyard, really good. A+ for Tomb of Ixalan. Shazam. Alright, next up we have Terror Tide. 2 colorless, black, for sorcery, Fathomless Descent. All creatures get -X/-X till end of turn, where X is the number of permanent cards in your graveyard. Why is this card bad? Just like not in. I don't think it's an F, but I do think it's a D. It's probably in the top end of D. Maybe in a very specialized deck it could perform a little bit better, but I don't know. I just feel like, you know, there's too many times where you're not going to get Languish out of this card, and all those times you're going to die pretty bad. So I'm going to D to Terror Tide, but we'll have to see. Alright, next up we have Tithing Blade, which for some reason won't go in the front where it belongs. There we go. 1 colorless and a black for an artifact. When Tithing Blade enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a creature. And it also has Craft with creature. I've not read Craft yet. Alright, whatever. 4 colorless and a black. Exile this artifact. Exile a creature you control or a creature card from your graveyard. Return this card transformed under its owner's control. Craft only as a sorcery. And on the back it is Consuming Sepulchre, which says is an artifact, and it says at the beginning of your upkeep each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. This card is probably not very good at all. I should put it in D. It's probably going to win the award for card I play the most. For card I play a lot. Card I'm going to have to lose a lot of games of after I cast and finally quit playing it. Because sack edicts normally aren't that good in limited, and then even if you always only exile one of your own creature cards, that decreases your descent, and I don't think that this lose one life, gain one life effect's gonna be good anymore, even though it was good on different cards in the past. D for Tithing Blade. Next up, we have Visage of Dread, which is colorless and a black for an artifact. When it enters the battlefield, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose an artifact or creature card from it. That player discards that card, and then craft with 2 creatures for 5 colorless and a black. And if you can do that, you get Dread Osiosaurus. Yeah, Osiosaurus. There we go. Creature, Dinosaur, Skeleton Horror, Menace. Whenever Dread Osiosaurus enters the battlefield or attacks, you mill 2 cards. You may mill 2 cards. Yeah, this card sucks too. In case you didn't know, since Craft exiles the artifact, then returns it to the battlefield, the creature will have Summoning Sickness. And the 2 mana, I Thought Sees You thing. This is also that, but it's conditional. I think this card's like bad on all fronts. A very overcosted creature on one side and a not good discard side on the front. Am I gonna give this an F? I'm gonna give this an F. I don't like this card at all. Alright, next up we have Vito's Inquisitor. 3 colorless and a black for a creature. It's a Vampire Knight. Pay 1 black, sacrifice another creature or artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on Vito's Inquisitor. It gains menace until end of turn, and it's a 3/3. So it's Versatile Giant, which, a lot of time isn't good enough anymore, but a pretty relevant ability with the pay 1 and sacrifice an artifact. You get to sacrifice, like, your Tithing Blade or whatever after you've gotten a little bit of value. And now you've got a 4/4 menace, and it can get easily better. Also, it's not limited, I just realized. A lot of the times, these effects say activate only as a sorcerer, only once each turn. This doesn't say that. This just pay 1 black, and you, end up leaving up a little bit of black mana up, and they go to remove something. You can just be like, okay, turn that into a counter on Vito's Inquisitor. Hold over removal spell. Okay, didn't need to cast it. Do this. Make it a little bigger. Alright, I'm in. Vito's Inquisitor is a good C. I'm moving it up. Alright, so we're done with black. Okay. What is this looking like? There we go. That'll be the thumbnail. 53 minutes. That is way too long. Normally I try to make these shorter, but sorry about those phone calls. I'm not going to have time to edit them out or whatever. But, it's part of just living life and trying to make content. But, yeah. Black's over. Like, comment, subscribe. We've got another video coming up very shortly. Hopefully I'll have these all pounded out by today or tomorrow. Thank you so much for your time. Red should be coming up next. We'll see you soon.